What's the worst thing you did as a horny teen? When I was 14 I cut a hole in my beanbag chair and humped it for about 15 minutes before my dad knocked on the door. He walked in to see me rush under the covers with my beanbag chair and a ton of those white styrofoam balls all over my bed. That was very hard to explain. It's not what you think, we're in love. I've always been more of a reader of erotica than a watcher of porn. One day, in Barnes & Noble, I found a book which contained elements of my fetish. I read it in the middle of the aisle until I came in my pants right in the middle of the store. There was one time where the internet was down and I was super horny. My family were on a 2-day trip to collect a cat they had been looking at online. I know, kinda weird. Anyway, I'm looking around in the attic for the box for the router, thinking maybe there will be something on that to help me out. I come across this black shoebox that was covered completely in cobwebs. Brushed them off and opened the box. It was full of black and white photos of some family and there was one picture with who I guessed was the mother. I still remember it now. She was in a black one-piece swimsuit with just enough cleavage to get my premature blood flowing. I jacked off to it like twice up in the attic. 14-year-olds have quick revival skills, and brought it downstairs. I left it in my locker for future use and basically forget about it. Fast forward 2 weeks later and I'm sitting in my room. My mom walks in and asks, do I have the remote for the stereo? I was busy playing video games and basically shrugged her off, so she takes it upon herself to look through my lockers. I don't even realize she's doing this, but I turn around and sure enough she's found the Ducking Family inspired vintage porn. I'm starting to go red, so I pretend I didn't see her and she just calls over, never punch a lion. This is so sweet. Where did you find this picture? I had forgotten about it. How this picture of me, Larry, and basically she starts listing off her family members. I'm freaking out internally, so unknowingly to me I jacked off to a picture of my now dead grandmother. It doesn't get much worse than that. Edit 1 for everyone asking. I don't have an actual locker. I suppose it's officially called a drawer. Just something I've always called it. Also, I am not posting the picture. It's bad enough I jacked off to it. I was on vacation with my boyfriend and his family when I was 17 and we were allowed to sleep together, but his parents were in the other bed next to us. We all went to bed and I woke up at around 1 AM and felt super horny and started jerking him off under the covers. Somehow we got away with 69 without waking his parents. Oh boy, we're taking a trip back to 17-year-old me. This lovely girl I met in high school, who I've already had previous experiences with, invites me over to her house for the first time. I meet her mom and head off into her bedroom for what would obviously R-rated activity. After some kissing back and forth, she decides to light some candles above her bed and tells me she wants to have sex here and now. This is my first time running it to home base, so I'm a little nervous but totally in. I lay her down like a missionary in Uganda and thrust with all my might, which is too much might. After about the third thrust I slam her head into the wall and knock down 2 of these candles onto the bed. The first one falls down straight to the sheets and starts a small fire. At the exact same time the other has the glass container of the candle fall directly onto her forehead. Now deciding whether the bed lighting on fire or the girl with probably a concussion who's half naked on the bed is pretty hard for a 17-year-old with a raging hard-on. But she decided for me by screaming for her mother. Before I have any time to even react to what just happened, the door comes whooshing open and her mother gets a look at the boy she just met defiling her daughter on a bed ablaze with a giant bruise developing on her face. It wasn't easy getting invited back. Shagged my then ex-girlfriend in the woods. She choked me with a belt because she thought it would be fun, and I passed out and fell against a tree. I woke up to her crying and thinking I was dead. Good times. Fell asleep after jacking it, penis still in hand. Parents walk in, get woken up by screaming. Mom screaming like the world is coming to an end. Dad just like, wash your hands before dinner. I masturbated with a faulty back massager that I had to connect split wires at the base to make it work. I think the dog chewed it. Anyway, each time I touched the split wires, I could see it shock, and I had to hold the wires together the entire time or it would turn off. Not an easy thing to do, and definitely not the safest. I even remember getting slightly shocked in my nether regions. I always imagined being killed by the stupid device and being found by my parents dead from clicking. Never stopped me though. It was an amazing vibrator. Sucked on a mannequin's tit in Target and got caught by security. Got my internet girlfriend's address. Came in a small glass bottle. Sealed it with wax and packaged it up. Went to the post office to ask an employee about shipping something with dry ice in it. When she asked what I was shipping, it suddenly struck me that the whole thing might be a little weird, so I excused myself and threw the bottle away. Switched to the female character in Temple Run and jacked off to her grunts. I have no shame. I fingered my girlfriend on the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland. Lived way out in the countryside far from any neighbors or most people. Spent most summers without seeing anyone from school. Well, over time I made a sex doll out of old pillows, electrical tape, and pilfered girls' clothes I'd grabbed when I was at a friend's house. I got the idea after watching an episode of Real Sex about them. I had a small hatch inside my bedroom closet that led to the attic. It was far enough away from the main pull-down steps that I felt confident no one would find it. I'd lock my door and blast rock music pretending that I was emo and had anger issues. But I'd really just be ducking it. This became my surrogate for whatever girl I was crushing on but was too afraid to ever speak to from 6th grade until senior year high school. At the beginning of senior year, a hurricane caused my bedroom ceiling to collapse into the attic, and even though it wasn't near the sex doll, I was still freaking out. So when my family went on a supply run during the aftermath, I made an excuse to stay and I pulled out. I guess at that time I was probably calling her Veronica. Carried her deep into the woods near my house to a fire pit we'd camp near. Ducked her one last time and burnt her. Edit. Oh god, I just glanced at this and saw it begins with describing how isolated I was growing up and ends with ducked her one last time and burnt her. I was into this guy who was a drummer, so when he left one of his drumsticks at a party, I stole it and masturbated with it, then gave it back. Edit. To answer some questions. I'm a girl. I didn't get splinters, and I washed it off before I gave it back. Waitress brushed her boobs against me while setting my food down. Proceeded to immediately wank myself silly in the restaurant bathroom. It was unisex, so I imagined that she'd used it too. Went from one side of town to the next at 2 AM on foot cause my then girlfriend told me she is alone at her house and she is horny. Was at a friend's house and he didn't want to drive me there. I still hate you, Martin. To set the scene, I was 17, living at home with my family. My room was the top floor of a tall house. There were 3 floors below me. For the past few weeks I've been texting this girl I met. After having a few dates, she finally comes back to my house one night. She texted her parents my address, asking to be picked up later that night. My parents are watching TV on the ground floor, but we escaped up many flights of stairs to my room. Officially, this was to hang out, but my parents are pretty liberal and in all likelihood knew our intentions were far more sinful. So we started watching TV, eventually getting closer, exchanging glances. Apollo 13 was on. Tom Hanks was lifting off and so was I. One thing I should point out is that this girl was properly filthy. This was not something I was particularly aware of before this night. Mid-movie, she decides to migrate from the sofa to my bed and slyly claim, "I bet you can't get me off here," in an ironic twist of fate. As everything starts to go wrong for Jim Lovell and his crew, everything seems to be going right for the first time in my sex life. A few minutes of playful wrestling turned into lip biting, then kissing for a while, and then both of our hands started to move further south. The next 15 minutes of Apollo 13 were a bit of a haze for me. Out of nowhere there is a distinct bang and slight vibration moving up my house. The front door has been opened. There are muffled voices from the ground floor. We both freeze. My fingers have stopped mid-entry. We decide it prudent to go downstairs and investigate what's going on. The voices in the hallway get clearer. Our footsteps get louder and our presence is known. No going back now. I step down the final few stairs, the girl following behind. Slowly from the legs up, these talking figures are increasingly unveiled. It's her parents. It's her parents who came to pick her up. Her parents who I have never met. now talking to my parents as if arranging some kind of awkward marriage proposal as in the days of yore. Her mother locks eyes at me, reaches out an outstretched hand to shake mine. My eyes widen open. My jaw drops as I begin to realize I have had no opportunity to wash my hands. The adrenaline resumes pumping and the shock begins to set in. My arm hasn't received this message though, as almost through reflex my dominant hand begins to move towards her mother's. Our hands clasped together for the most moist, uncomfortable, horrific handshake that I will never forget. TLDR. Went to second base with a girl. Presented the evidence to her mother. I was in a hotel room alone in Las Vegas while my dad was in a business meeting. I jerked off to a steak or some sort of piece of meat in a magazine because it kind of looked like a vagina. I tied myself up in the woods with a rope attached to my penis and liked to struggle against my bonds until I came. On this particular day my mother realized I was missing and came looking for me. She found me struggling in the bushes with my penis tied to a tree and had a panic attack. I panicked and blamed it on a friend playing around. To this day she says she still has nightmares about it.